me today. And first, since it is a math class, we're going to start with a math problem. So, I've got some marker boards because this is what I use with my kids and some socks. So I'll give everyone a marker board. If your marker doesn't work, just let me know. To share.
They always sit quietly while you have.
And you can solve this problem any way that you would like. And if you need manipulatives, you can use them. I'll give you a couple minutes just to give it your best shot.
Okay.
Okay, I'm on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I figure it has to be one of them.
Oh yeah?
That's a good strategy. I'll look in your board. What is she doing over here?
I think the last word depends on what that last word is.
It all depends on what the whole thing is.
One of them has to be right. I read this book, I hope.
So when you're ready, give me a thumbs up.
Taylor would be last. Taylor's always last. It has to be perfect, right?
Yeah. She had to erase and redo. Okay, is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so talk to your partners next to you, your elbow partners, how it felt when you were trying to solve that problem.
Like I had no idea what I was supposed to
What do
do.
you think this is?
Well, I saw the numbers,
Yeah, that's what I saw too.
and I recognized that. I could see some things like has, she, and I assumed not, bought.
That's a big question.
At the toast, it was a place.
Yeah.
But how many does she have? I don't know if this means together or
Yeah.
Something.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know
So it was really just a pretty good guess.
Yep, that's what mine is too.
Okay, so I've been hearing lots of good discussion, and so could a couple people raise their hand and share how they were feeling when they tried to solve this problem? Yeah.
I didn't know what these words were saying to me. So it was very
So it made the problem kind of hard to solve?
mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else like to share?
we had a good discussion about if I knew a couple more words, I could probably get it. It wouldn't have to be the whole thing, but if I had a couple more words,
Yeah.
I could probably figure it out for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. So I also gave this question to my twin brother, and he shared feelings of being like frustrated and confused. And he was like, "Well, I could see the numbers. I don't know what to do with them. I could add, I could subtract, I could multiply, I could divide." And so he also tried to do them all, and he's like, "Well, but I don't really know what answer to give to you." So basically, I just took you through the journey of an ELL student and how they can see numbers, which they'll probably recognize, but trying to figure out exactly what to do with them with the language barrier is something, just a part of the beginning of their struggles and their journey to try and do math. And so today I titled my presentation, "Oh, the Places They'll Go." One, because I love Dr. Seuss, and two, because I've already begun to see so much success in the two students that I work with, and just wanting to give you guys these skills and strategies, that way you can have your kids go some places too. And so to start off with, I utilize two main texts in my research. I utilize Supporting English Learners in Math Class, and then I also use our textbook for K-8 math. So those are the two ones that I got the bulk of my research with, but I also read magazine articles, and I used these books up here as well. And this is my main instruction guide. So beginning, I found in this book that there are approximately 5 million ELLs enrolled in public schools in the United States, and that's according to the National Clearinghouse. And that was in 2007. So as the ELL population has continued to grow, that number is much larger. And basically the textbooks and all the articles that I found talked about the dual task challenge, which is referring to having to like work through academic language and sentence structure, and also trying to figure out mathematical procedures. And so for the first book, which was our textbook, these were the strategies that I found would help ELL students based on research that they had completed. Their first one is utilizing students' native language, which they found helps students feel that their culture is valued, and also, even though they can speak their native language, it's still developing their English. For comprehensible input, that means that the message you're trying to get across is making sense to the students. And I found a couple different ways you can simplify sentence structure, get rid of confusing words, or just if it's too wordy, just voiding some words out. And then also using a variety of tools from manipulatives to pictures, diagrams, and models. Also explicitly teaching vocabulary. I found that a couple different ways worked. For my kids, we had our own little math word wall, and so that way it was kept in their book box, which was kind of fun because then sometimes when they were reading, I found them like reading through their math words. And so having that also on the bigger wall for all students, having them taught in authentic situations, kind of like teach to the moment. So say you're learning about subtraction, rather than just being like, here is this line that looks like a hyphen, it's a subtraction line. So it's like putting it in the moment. And then also math verbs, because there's so many, you don't want to do like keywords where this means this, but instead being like, subtraction can be said a ton of different ways. And so kind of just introducing them to just the wide variety of vocabulary in math. For cooperative groups, there's such power in ELL students talking together, listening to each other, and the one thing that I really read a lot was just having it be a safe environment. So that way they could take risks orally and work through things, and they're not feeling intimidated by a whole class structure, and so it'll kind of give them confidence to actually one day discuss in class. And then discourse, which is referring to classroom discussion, and revoicing was a theory that they came up with that helps ELLs to hear a topic or an idea more than once, and to often hear it in a restated way. So they're using appropriate language that they'll hear in an actual math problem, and usually that discourse is done by a teacher. For the second research that I did, which was in this book, I found that scaffolding can be done by activating prior knowledge. For example, when I was working with my students, we started adding 2 digits plus 2 digits, and a lot of the times we were linking back to like, what are combinations that equal 10, like how do we get to those landmark numbers? And so just kind of reminding them of what they know. And it gives them a little bit of power knowing that, okay, I know how to do this, so I can apply it to this next problem. Productive struggle, which was also a struggle for me at the beginning because my helper in me wants to rescue them rather than let them figure it out themselves. And so just giving them the time to hash it out, try a couple different theories, because in the end it will give them a deeper understanding of the problems, and that way they'll be able to apply it not only to this one particular math problem, but to a variety of problems like it. Manipulatives, which is also huge, just for them to be able to physically work with the problem. Up front here I've got a couple different ones that I use. We use a 10 frame, like bead rack, and then this is also another single bead rack. We use popsicle sticks, grouping them in 10s and then having the 1s, and these are 20 frames, and then we also used 10 frames. But you can use it for different problems, Unifix cubes, little bead counters, there's lots of varieties. And that's also a good thing of like keeping a variety, not just using one manipulative over and over again. Asking questions, which is huge, especially with the investigations curriculum, of letting them do it and not necessarily asking probing questions, but ones that get them to think deeper and just kind of to help them vocalize what they're learning. You can ask questions that of higher level, which is, it does take practice, and so you just kind of have to Like at the beginning, I made a note card of questions to ask because I found myself saying, "Oh yeah, that's right." And then I did a teacher interview and like I asked for what feedback she gave. And she was like, I don't say, "Oh yeah, that's right." You say like, "Okay, I see what you did there," and comment on their thinking and ask questions to see exactly if a breakdown is occurring and also to see where to go next. For real world context, this is huge just to make the math come alive. And so when I was working with them, I would either insert their name or interest that I knew that they had, or just like real life situations where they would actually live and have a background knowledge with. And that just makes math a little more fun. And they always light up when I'm like, "Okay, Semble did this," and he's like, "I did?" So that's always fun. And then total physical response, or TPR, is huge with these kids as well in terms of like action. So we would be like, "We're going to multiply," and then he would kind of do like the multiply. And just like having that physical connection does things with your brain and activates nerve cells, and so that way they just have one more anchor to that math problem. For student invented strategies, this was huge also in our class textbook of letting them figure out how they want to solve the problem and not forcing the algorithm or a particular strategy. Instead, you're letting them guide the answer. And so that way, if they come to a new problem and you're not there, they know how they want to solve it, rather than, "Okay, Miss Sazama wants me to do it this way. I don't really know how to do it, but..." And so that way they have their own strategy to link onto. And then the last one was talk. You want kids to talk about math, love math, talk about math, love math, and then talk about math. So lots of talking needs to occur about what they're doing, how they're doing it, if they have the struggle, how to work through that. And so that way, if you get that oral language, it will also help with that language barrier. So those two scaffolding slides are basically what drove my instruction for my two kids, and a lot of the other research that I did lined up with these things as well. So now I'll kind of explain. I want you to meet my friends. I worked with Semble and Sumali. They were at Hawthorne, and they were third grade students. I did 12 weeks with them, and the way their classroom is set up, they have 20 minutes, sometimes it's 15 minutes, and they call it Math Mania. It's right after they do a read aloud. And so most of the other kids are doing math games in their math binder, and then I worked with these two students. They did, this teaching number book is based off AVMR, which is a 1 to 5 scale, and 5 is mastery. And they both came in at the same level, so that's why I chose those students to work together. And they both were at a 1 for both place value and structuring. And so they need to be at the 5 in 3rd grade. The foundation of my intervention was the teaching number procedures, which are in this book. It's an AVMR math recovery book. And I'll explain more what those actually look like later. I did 6 minutes per need at the beginning, and then I just wanted to make sure that I was getting both in. And then I gave myself some wiggle room if I spent more time on place value or structuring. The particular manipulatives that I used, were the 10 frames, the bead racks. I used whiteboards, so that way, they're not caught up in the erasing factor. An empty number line, I screened them, which I'll explain later, and then the stick bundles, which are the popsicle sticks. So a typical lesson that we would work on would look kind of like this, where I did 2 particular activities from the book. And I will actually, do you guys also have your marker boards? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yes. So we are going to kind of take a little stroll through a particular lesson that I would do. The first one is 8.4.3, so I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so this is how the teaching number book is set up. So it gives you the number of what you're going to work on, and then it kind of gives you a heading of what exactly the skill that they're working on is. So this is adding to a decade with the numbers 1 through 5. So that way they're trying to get to that landmark number of like a 30, for example, and they're just adding the numbers 1 through 5. So basically, I'll show you an example of what I would do. It gives you the instructions really thoroughly, so that's nice. So that way you are spending less time trying to come up with the problems, and you could spend more time formatively assessing. And so you would place out 5 10-dot frames. So I would be like, that's too big for this, but okay. So I would set out 5 10-dot frames. And then you also set out 1 10 8-dot frame. And these are those look like. So we look for the 8, which is this. And what it involves a lot of asking questions. So you ask like, how many dots are there all together? And then they'll do different strategies, like, you know, they'll count them individually as what they did at the beginning. And then some of them, Semble was good about like seeing the 10s right away and then adding the 1s. And then you ask how many more to make 60. So they'll figure it out that it's 58, and the question is, how many more do you need to get to 60? And some of them would subtract, they would do think addition. And so basically you're utilizing the 10 frames for them to see those 2 empty spots. I also sometimes would switch it up and use the popsicle sticks, because they really like those, and so I saw that they were interested in it, so I would switch it up. And then like another question, I'll have you guys do this one so you can really feel it out. So this one would be, this is a screen, so I would lay out 2 10-dot frames and then a 9-dot frame. And so you have them look at it for about, I did like 3 seconds. And then you screen it, and then you kind of make it fun, so like make it exciting, like, oh my goodness, I forgot what's under the screen, can you help me? And they're like, oh, I got it. So just kind of make it a game. And so then, you know, they're going to be like, oh, it's 29. And then you ask how many dots are there all together. And then I would add the like, well, how many 10s is that? How many 1s is that? Just to get that further questioning. And then you say, how many more dots to make 30? And then, let's see, 1. And then another one, basically the text says like continue with similar examples, so you do have to come up with some thinking. And the way I would do it, I'd be like, okay, I know that this one's going to be kind of tricky, so I'll wait a little bit till the end to do that. And so then I would do a couple more of those and then try the sticks. For the next activity, structuring, it's 8.5.6, which I'll show you here. Okay, it's addition by going through 10. And I use the bead racks for this. And these are homemade ones that you guys can easily make. It's that tag board and then pipe cleaners and then pony beads. And I also had like a fancy one that looks like this that has 2 rows, but it's being used right now. So we will adapt with this. And so basically you move 9 on the upper row. So I move 9 over. And you have your 1 over here. And then you move 2 over on the lower rack. And the reason they're 2 different colors is that so they can see that grouping of 5 and 5. And then you kind of show this one, so you're like, move 1 over on the upper row, and then move 1 back on the lower row. And you're saying how many were 9 and 2. And so they're seeing 10 and 1 is 11. And this is kind of like you can have them actually physically touch the model, or you can move it and just have them continually seeing and answering what the answer is. Kind of depends on what you prefer. I had them work it out just so that they were seeing, okay, I'm moving 1 and I'm moving 1, and it's giving me a 10 and then the leftovers. And then this particular activity also utilizes working through the 8s. And so basically this kind of stems off of that pairing to get 10. And it helps later in the later activities. And so one thing I really noticed about these was that they build on each other, which I really liked. So it made me really be like, okay, we really need to get this solid because I know it'll help them later. Rather than, okay, I think they kind of got it, let's go on to the next one. Because if they have this, it'll help them so much later. Because I noticed later that Sumali wasn't linking to the 10, so he would be like adding 17, and he wouldn't think of like, okay, I can add the 10 and then I can add 2 more to get another 10 and then add the 5. whereas he was like counting individually. So then I went back and reviewed this, and then he was able to get it later. Another lesson I'll show you guys. This was a later lesson because obviously it's a 3 and a 5. So place value is 9.2.2, which is on 2 pages. So I'll show you this beginning one. This is on the marker board, and if you guys feel like writing an empty number line, feel free to. So we drew an empty number line, and I started off by physically doing it myself. So as you can see on that picture, the beginning, you're writing, and I showed them both ways. I said I'm starting at 31 and then hopping over 53. And then I also said sometimes it's easier when you're adding to start with the bigger number. And so showing them that commutative property without actually having to define it to them, but so that was good for them to see. And so, but for the sake of this problem, I did 31 is how we worked it out together. And then I started from 31 and I added 53. And I added by tens, just because I tried to kind of predict what I thought they would do. And then we added 3 tops. And so that was my modeling. And then I went through in the next problem. And then also as this, you can see it says, can you work it out another way? Draw another empty number line. And so this would also be kind of for like their high flyers, because Semble I found out in the middle was advancing faster than Somali. And so I would be like, okay, you come up with another way. And then I would work with Somali a little more. The second page of this particular activity is at the top here. And they use cards, as you can see, but I just made up the numbers. And then now they worked out 34 plus 43, and then they were able to work it out using that empty number line. And I noticed that Semble wanted to kind of stray away from the empty number line, and I let that happen. I said, well, you can use whatever strategy you want. And then you just added different ones. Like, they give you a couple problems if you are struggling coming up with a problem, but we just kept working through the empty number line, which works really well for Somali. So the good thing about using such variety is you discover what works best for them. And so those are 2 particular lessons. I'll just show you that for the first one I used 10 frames in the bead rack, or you could substitute with the stick bundles. And then I used an empty number line and a bead rack. And basically the huge thing, the huge thing about this particular text, the teaching number, is formative assessment. You're continually asking yourself, okay, what do they know? How are they solving this? Do I need to review something? I'm seeing they're doing this because you're asking those questions. You can see where their thought process is. And then you'll be like, okay, they're not so strong on this. Let's go back a couple activities. And not being caught up in like, okay, I want to get them to a 5. Keep going. It looks like they have it. It was good for me to be like, no, we need to assess and then go where they need to go, which was huge. Let's clean up my 10 racks. So in the beginning, the 2 research-based variables that I was testing was partnership versus isolation, because beginning my case study with Nikki Doohan, was the teacher that I worked with at Hawthorne. She said that she had research that showed that when kids work with partners rather than isolation, they have higher variable of success. And so I wanted to test that. And at the beginning, I just worked with Semble, and he's a really sweet kid, so it's not hard for him to like try. But I did that for 2 weeks, and then I inserted Somali, and it was like a world different. Like, they were both super excited. Like, every time they're like, yes, we're gonna do math, which was so not what they were like before. And just the progress that they made in like 3 minutes was what I had done for 2 weeks. And so it was definitely proven true. And then now, this is a little, teaser, but Semble is now a 5 in both. And so I took him out and then wanted to test the partner in isolation again. And just working with Somali solo, I haven't seen as much progress. And so that was really interesting, because I thought, okay, you want to try and get your students individually, but really the partnership worked in my particular research. And then I also wanted to test the success of the particular teaching number activities and see if I wanted to use that in my own classroom someday. And then Semble and Somali coming into this were really willing to participate, which helped my study. and they had contagious energy, and I put external and internal, because sometimes they were just really, really pumped about it, and I kind of fed off of that, and sometimes they weren't so excited, they were kind of tired after lunch, and so then I brought the extra energy, and they were able to latch onto that. And so what worked for us is this slide, and partnership is what I found was successful with my particular students. Just an overall excitement for math, so when I showed how much I love math and how fun it could be, then they caught on to that. The teaching number procedures, which was that green book up there, really, really worked for it. I swear by it. I absolutely love it. And just how it breaks things up and really helps you to be very authentic and critical in your formative assessment. Also, the productive struggle, and these ones in blue are referring to the fact that I found them in the textbooks. So productive struggle, even though a lot of the times I wanted to be like, okay, let me help you with this, or grab that marker and be like, here, I'll show you, just giving them the time to figure it out. The manipulatives, which were huge, even though a lot of the time they were just working with their marker boards, having the stick bundles for them to physically count or move the bead rack were huge to help them understand the concepts. Asking probing questions, which was great improvement for myself and for them as well. Just getting them to think deeper so that way they can apply their learning to multiple problems. The prior knowledge, activating that and being like, okay, I know you know how to do this. And so then I would show them that they know how to do it by asking them a couple of questions. Like, let's figure out exactly how many it takes to make 10 of this particular number. That was an easier number. And then we'd be like, it's just the same, the numbers are just bigger, and then we would apply it to the next thing. So showing them that they really do know how to do it. And then the student invented strategies, which is also fantastic because they can link it on to this is how I solve this problem, and I know I can do it this way. And so just giving them the opportunity of like, well, like that particular one was an empty number line, but Sembo wanted to solve it a different way, so I didn't stick to exactly what the book said. You can adapt and be like, well, you can solve it any way that you want. And then the adaptation of real-world contexts, just because one thing this book doesn't do is incorporate real-world problems. So that was the one con that I found. And so I would just add, like, Sembo had 31 marbles. He added 53 marbles. And so basically that's kind of your job to supplement it, because no curriculum is going to be perfect or no book's going to be perfect. You need to kind of know what you know and know what works and then adapt your materials to that. And then, so I put, will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed, by Dr. Seuss. Because Sembo is now a 5 in place value and structuring. And Sumali is at a 3 in place value and at a 4 in structuring, which is good for him because he's had some behavior problems recently that has kind of slowed down his advancement, but he still loves this math intervention, so it's a good time for him to kind of regroup. So as you can see, it's definitely successful. So my overall case study results were that the scaffolding strategies worked that I found in both the textbooks and my supplementary resources, and that the one thing to remember is that these strategies help all students. You shouldn't just apply them to ELL students, but that they work for everyone. And then my challenge to you is to take the extra time, because I spent a lot of time on this particular project and this case study, and it was a good thing because I really loved doing it, so it wasn't that hard to spend the extra time, but kind of figuring out how to differentiate between all your students, because you'll have these low-level students, but you're also going to have ones that come in as a 5, and you have to figure out how to challenge them and keep them advancing. And then kind of with that scaffolding for all students of figuring out, okay, you're here, how can I get you here? And then do what works, and to find out what works, you have to do research. And don't just kind of go off of, okay, so this one book says this. And you can try that, and if it doesn't work, be willing to change. But I found what works best for me was using multiple resources and then letting that guide my instruction. The I am someone, just making the students feel valued throughout it all. And basically that relationship piece, which is so huge. And Randy Nelson would say, right, relationship is primary, and I think he speaks true so much. And basically just that time we spent together, because the first time both students entered, I really just tried to get to know them, and that way they wanted to do well. And I was like an intrinsic motivator, and then at the end they were intrinsically motivated to do the math. And this is the last quote. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And so that just kind of rings true to me of like, we need to be the people that care a whole awful lot, and to help them get better at math and to help them love math. And so that is the end of my presentation. Do you guys have any questions? Natalie.